Hello, in this video I'm going to develop a Flutter app which builds off of a previous app that I had and adds a second screen. So the purpose of this video is really just to show some basic navigation. Here's the app I have. If you've watched any previous tutorials, you know about this. So I have a grocery list app, which allows you to generate a list of items to buy in the grocery store. Right here, when the app loads, it's got some default items in the list, and you can click hold to slide them around. So it's actually a reorderable list that I'm using. And you can swipe to the right to buy them, or at least put them in your cart. You can see when you do that, by the way, a little array is printed out down here in the IDE console. Eventually I'd want to show that on the screen, of course, somewhere. Click a button, see what's in your cart, but it's not doing that yet. And you can swipe to the left to delete. That doesn't put anything in your cart, it just deletes it. And you can type down here and say, add the item. Okay, that's where I'm at. I'm at the stage, though, where I need a little more functionality. And the functionality I want is the ability to manage lists at large. So maybe I have one list for one grocery store. You know, this is when I go to Stop and Shop. And when I go back to Stop and Shop, I'm going to start with my list because I buy the same stuff every couple weeks, right? And maybe I want to amend it and, you know, swipe and delete some things or add a few things. But for the most part, I want to be able to save lists tagged with stores. And maybe eventually I want to delete a list. So I need another set of widgets in order to do that. And obviously I could just do it on this page or this screen. I could just wipe out all the widgets that you see here and replace them with other things. And there are reasons to do that. It actually makes it easier to get access to the data. That would be a single page app. If you saw a video I posted recently where I talked about the difference between single page and multi-page apps, you know a little bit about why you might want to do that in that manner. But no, today I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to show you maybe what the Flutter development team first recommends you do if you're having an app with a whole other set of widgets and you really want another screen. So it's called navigation, and you can create a second screen, navigate to it, and then navigate back when you're ready. It is certainly one way to handle the problem of having multiple groupings of widgets that provide different functionality to the user. So that's what we're going to do here today, navigating to a second screen. We'll create the screen first and then talk about how to navigate to it and how to get back. One thing I won't do in this video, though, is show you how to pass data back and forth. I'm going to save that for a follow-up because I don't want things to get too long here. So we'll create the navigation, but we won't actually pass the data. And I think it's really significant to mention that because when you do make a second screen in this manner and you navigate to it, you don't have access to any of the data that existed on the first screen. And the reason, it may seem odd, but the reason for that is because every widget in this screen and the list itself of grocery items that you see here is all being defined and maintained inside this class. This is my state class, which simply extends state, and this goes along with my stateful widget override right here. Right, so that's a pair of classes. You know by now that, but when you extend stateful widget, you then have to extend the state class that's associated with it. Right, and that's what this does right here. And that's where you write most of your code inside here. So this is all of the data that's associated with the app. It's all inside this particular class. Well, great. So here's my list of groceries. When I go and I make a new screen, I'm not going to have access to this data. And I will eventually need it there because I want to be able to work with this array. I want to actually manage this array at a global level and save it and do something with it from that screen. Well, that's not in this video, but it will be in the next one, of course. Let's just get to the new screen and create one and go from there. All right, so everything I'm going to do tonight is not of my own design at all. It's from the Flutter development site. So if you prefer just to go here and learn it that way, you can do that as well. So you can look here. This is the cookbook section of Flutter development. It's probably the greatest part of the docs, I think, personally. They just have a series of tutorials that, well, pretty much show you how to do everything you need to do, including, I believe, connecting to Firebase may even be somewhere in here. But they talk about data persistence, which is something we're going to have to do as well for this grocery app, networking, and so on and so forth, and navigation, of course, right here. So I'm basically just bouncing around with some ideas in here. I'm going to skip a little of the first couple and just kind of get right down to the good stuff, which is navigating with named routes, and and then eventually this is something you have to do, but we'll get to that, as I said, later. So how does this work? Well, first off, to create another route, and I do, by the way, call them routes to distinguish them from the word root, which makes me think of the root directory of a drive. So I'll use that term. I'll try not to slip up. All right, so when you want to create a new route, what you do is you just create a new class extension of either state list widget or stateful widget. And I'm going to take that latter route. I'm going to extend stateful widget again. And because I'm doing that, I am also going to have to override, I'm going to actually have to extend the state class, because every time you extend a stateful widget, you then have to extend state. So you make a pair of classes, and you do all your work in the extension of state. So I'm going to have to basically copy this structure over again to make a whole new screen. Right? I'm going to do it down here at the bottom of my code. So I'll give myself a little comment, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and say, now I'll make the new screen, or the second screen. All right. Well, I could type all of this out from scratch, right? I could just extend the classes and override the functions that you see up here. But I find it annoying, and I always have, when writing Flutter apps declaratively like this and creating the widgets in this declarative fashion, getting everything correct with the right parentheses and semicolons. And I know that the plugin for Visual Studio Code tries to do a decent job for you, but I still find this little like foxtrot dance that we do of constructors inside constructors and arguments inside. I find it annoying, and you make one mistake, there's a comma out of place, and now you got to go back and spend 15 minutes. So you know what I'm going to do? Shamelessly just copy what I have here and just kind of clean it up down at the bottom. So I'm going to start up here. I'm going to copy the extension of stateful widget, and I'm going to copy my entire homepage class, or my state, sorry, my homepage state, and we'll put it down here. Now, there's a lot of code I have to delete, but I think I'd rather do that, and it's faster than just kind of sitting here and typing everything again from scratch and letting even with autocomplete. All right, so the first thing I need to do is clean up the names, I think. So I need a name for this. I can't obviously make it class my homepage because that's already been taken. So I'm going to call it my, what shall we call it? It's kind of a global level page that operates and manages all of the lists. How about my management? Or manage is too much to type. How about my manage page? All right. Okay. And so then if I have done that, right, I now need to come here and I need to change this to manage. And then I can call this class whatever I want. Right, here's the actual class right here. Let's do this one first. So I can call this whatever I want, but I think it makes a lot of sense to call it my manage state. And then up here, manage state and my manage state. And all the red will go away. Now, what did I just do? So we've talked about this before. And once you do this maybe 2, 3, 4, 9, 10, 15 times, you start to get the hang of exactly what's going on. So I'm just going to say it one more time really quickly because this does get confusing, right? So you've just extended stateful widget. And when you extend stateful widget, you have to override this method called create state that exists inside the stateful widget class. And that's really all you have to override at this point. It's really the only thing you have to do. And when you override that method, you're going to return from create state a new state object. This is the constructor you're calling the constructor of the state class when you do this. Right, that's down here. This is the definition of the state class. Here's what you call the constructor. The fat arrow syntax is just a way of saying I'm returning something. I could have just as well used, curly braces like this, and inside here I actually just could have said return, and then underscore my management or my managed state right there. That would accomplish the exact same thing as what I have with the fat arrows. In fact, we'll just leave that. Same thing. And this is only here because that's the data type, right? That's the return type. That's what gets returned by create state. So I put it out in front. So I might actually be able to get rid of it because Dart has type inference. So it infers the type based on the return that's here. So I technically probably don't even need that to be there. Let's see if I refresh. Yeah, the app builds just fine and I have no problem whatsoever. All right, but to be, well, I don't know, for good code style, I think it's nice to put the return type before this, so we'll keep it right there. And then, of course, here is the definition of underscore my managed state, and that's where we're extending with the extension of the state class right here. All right, so what do we need inside here? Well, we certainly don't need any of this stuff. We don't need the text editing controller. We don't need any of these functions that do any of the reordering, so I can get rid of all of that. Then in here I had the build items method, which was my own design. This was just a way of building the reorderable list items that I was swiping left and right to get rid of. Well, that certainly doesn't belong. We don't need that anymore. So we can get rid of that entire thing. We do need to leave our widget, our override of build, because that's a mandatory method that we have to have whenever we override the state class. So we keep that in here, and we're going to clean this up because obviously we don't need all the stuff that's in here that you see right now. So let's go through the scaffold and just clean it up. So right off the bat, I'm going to actually leave in the app bar, and there's a reason I want to do that. Having an app bar actually gives you an automatic button to go backwards to the previous page. So that actually makes your navigation maybe a little bit easier. It's one less thing you have to worry about. So I'm going to leave that app bar in for now. My body and my children, I'm going to leave the expanded in there as well, because expanded widgets are great for putting things like lists inside of them, because lists don't have a definitive size, and neither do columns. And so, because they can just keep accruing things inside of them. And so when you do that, when you put something of no specific constraint vertically inside something else of no specific constraint, like if you just put the reorderable list right inside the column, then you're going to get a major problem when you try to run the app. It actually doesn't build. The expanded actually takes care of that, so it's just kind of there to deal with constraints. And I haven't really looked into this with much detail, so I don't completely understand exactly how that plays out, but it does fix the problem, and that's how everybody does it, so we're going to do that too. All right, so for my children, I don't want any of these build items or anything else like that. I think all I really want, I'm just going to leave the expanded in there, and I'm going to give, let's get rid of this. I don't want that. So we'll get rid of the reorderable list view. I think I'll just put in a regular old list view, like so. And I don't think I'll put a darn thing in it, comma. And this is, oh, that's what the problem is. Wait a minute. No, I don't want to do that at all. Sorry. Let's take this back. Okay, so what do I want to do? Let's go ahead here. So let's get rid of, let's see, inside my expanded, I'm just going to have a child. So yeah, we're going to go from here like this. And in here, I'm going to put a list view. Like so. Okay, so there's nothing in that list view for the time being, but I got to put something. So you have something inside that child widget. So we'll put that for now. Okay, I do not need the text field, so we're going to get rid of that. And I don't know if I want the raise button or not. I certainly don't. If I leave it, I don't have any functions for it to call, so I'm going to null that. And inside the text here, I might say edit list or something like that, right? Or maybe we're not going to have any functionality for this yet, but how about save list? There you go. All right, and I'll save the whole thing, and this should rebuild without any trouble. And there you go. I still have the same app. I'm not showing anything at this point, but that is the skeleton of my second screen. Now I actually have to make the app go there and go between the screens. Okay, what do I do? Well, if you're going to put routes inside an app, what you usually do is you go way back up to the top here. In your first extension of stateless widget, which is basically just the framework of the app itself, where you returned a material app right here. At this stage of the game, we're going to write a little bit of code to tell the app what screen to go to when it starts. So which of those pairings of classes, is it my homepage and my homepage state, or the other one that I just wrote, which of those pairings of classes is the one that the app should start with? And this is a very easy thing to do. This is just fairly declarative. The one thing that I'll stress you must do at this point, though, is you have to get rid of this home property. Because when you define a material app, if you have a home, it will always just go there. All right, and you're not doing that anymore. You're actually putting routes in the app, so you get to specify where you want it to go. All right, and what people usually do, so at this point, you can define your routes up here. So what they will usually do is just kind of put that in. It goes in as a property, right? And it's actually a collection of routes. So inside the curly braces, I then name my routes, and I then point to the particular classes that define those routes. So what, as I said, people will usually do is that for the root route of the app. And that slash has a long history, right? When we visit a web page, that's also the first. When we want the home page, we go to slash. So that's the customary. You can put whatever you want here. That's your name for whatever you want, but most people will choose to put that. And then this is like a key value pairing as in JSON. So I'm going to put a colon after that, and then context. And then we'll use fat arrow. So this is really what I'm writing right here is just a function. This is an anonymous function right now with just the parentheses and an argument inside of it. And that's going to return or point to my home page right there. All right, so when we ask for the slash route, this function will run. This function, remember, is an object. The function itself is the value associated with this key, and that function will run and generate the screen that's associated with this. This is what we always had for our home page. All right, now I have to make my second route, and so I need a name for that. And we could call it slash. And just like when you are navigating between web pages with a multi-page web site, you would put slash and then the name of it. I'm just going to call it screen2, like so. And then same thing, colon, and then anonymous function with an argument, context, which is going to get passed to the constructor for the second screen, which now I forget what I called it. So if the first one was my home page, I'm going to go all the way down here and say, what did I call it? I called it my manage page. And we'll put that there. And remember, it's a constructor call, so we have to put that like so. All right, and then I can put a comma if I want. I shouldn't have to, but because it's the end of that little JSON type data structure right there. So that is the definition of my two routes. And now I actually have to go ahead, and so we'll put a comma after them, like so. And now I need to go ahead and specify which one starts the screen, or starts the app. So that's just simply done by setting a property called initial route, like that. And all you do here is name it. What do you want? I want the initial route to be that one. We'll change that in a minute so you can see what happens, of course. And there you go. And I'm going to run it. And here you can see it over here running. Sorry, it's off my main screen just so I have some room. But when I refresh, you come right back to the screen. So you're saying, well, you haven't changed anything. It does exactly what it did before. And yes, it does. That's what it should do. But watch this. If I take my initial route, and instead of making it slash, I make it screen2, save, run. Now it opens up to there. All right, that's the second page. Now there's a list here, but there's no items in it, so you don't see anything. But you can see my button, save list down there, which has a null callback on the click, so it doesn't do anything. And I mentioned before that keeping the app bar in is kind of cool because I get that button for free up there. Just takes me right back. Haha, it takes me to the other route. Clever, okay? Otherwise, I would have to actually put a button. I'd have to embed a button in that second page in order to get to this one. Well, all right, that's not the way the app is supposed to work. So you might actually be wondering, how did it know to take me back to that one when, you know, what I've basically just done by creating and setting up the app this way is I've said this is the home page effectively. So why did it go, how does this know to go to that one when that's not the home page and I haven't even come from that one, right? It's kind of an interesting thing. I'm not exactly sure. I think it may be because I only have 2 routes in here. If I were to have another one, I'm not quite sure where that would take me. But that might be worth playing around with just to see, you know, you could add another route here. Of course, you'd have to add a class to go with it, or you'd get yelled at for not being able to complete this. And then seeing where that took you. Anyway, put that off screen for a minute. I'm going to go back to what I had where my initial route is just the regular home page. All right, now, so I'm here when the app starts, but I need to obviously come up with a way to get to the first or the other page from this location. So how am I going to do that? I need a button or something on this page to take me over to the other one. So I am going to add, let's see, let's use something I haven't used. Let's use a floating action button. A floating action button. And let's see, I'm going to put it at the end of the scaffold. These things go right before the scaffold ends. It's a great place to put it. It's going to float down at the bottom of the screen, I think. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I just got to find the right place to insert it. Yeah, right here after the column. Looks good. So we'll hit return. All right, and to add a floating action button, you type, not surprisingly, floating action button, which is the property name. This is a little bit confusing. Floating, let me explain what that does for a second there. All right, and then you make a floating action button right here, like that. And we have to do some more work with that. But so this is not a return type at all. What this is just a property of a scaffold. Scaffolds have lots of properties. They have app bars, they have bodies, and they have floating action buttons because they expect to get them if you want one. So that's what that is. And then here is the call to the actual constructor of the floating action button itself. And there you go. Now it's underlined probably because I must at least provide, I must override, or I must define the onPressed method or something like that. It's probably mandatory. I'm not getting that, but okay. Maybe it's just saying, let's see, why are you yellow? Yes, the parameter onPressed is required. So I have to define that. Okay, so in here, that's what I'll do. So onPressed must be defined. Now, if I I'm not going to put anything there yet. So let's just say onPressed is null. So there's no function at this time. But I have to at least say that it's null. And after I do that, then the floating action button gets a child if you want it. This is if you wanted to style it and put something on it. So I'm going to put an icon on it. So I'm going to use the icon constructor, and then icons, you kind of type them like you would any enumerated thing. Right? So there's a variety of icons that you can use. So capital icon again, and then dot, or icons dot, and you get a whole choice of things that you might want to put in there. There are a lot of them. Not sure what I want to go with. There's probably a navigate one. Let's see. Yeah, navigate next. Navigation. Navigate before. Natural people. I have no idea what these look like. All right, well, at the risk of being... Well, let's see if we can find something grocery app related. Let's see. I doubt it. Why would there be that? G. Yeah, of course not. Is there like manage or settings, or what? There's got to be something that's appropriate for this. You can actually just start typing, and it'll just start filling it in. Memory, merge type, message. I can't find anything that I like. Let's see, icons dot ma. No, okay. Why waste time? NA. Navigate next. We'll just go with that. That's it. So I'm just going to build this and show you what happens. There it is. There's the floating action button at the bottom. And when I click it, nothing happens, of course. But if I put a function here, something will happen. So if I just put a little anonymous function and I say, I don't have to return anything currently. So let's just go this type of thing, and let's put in, I don't know, maybe print something at the bottom. Let's just go ahead and make the navigation happen. So inside here, let's do navigator dot. Now, if you only have one other route, you can actually just say navigator dot push, and it goes to the second route. Sorry, it goes to the second route. But I'm actually building an app that might have multiple routes, so I'm going to use what's called push named, which just goes to it takes the app and moves it to the next route. Context is the first argument, and in here I just put the name of the route that I want to go to as it exists in the app at the top in that routes map that I made, that mapping. And so that's called screen 2, like that. All right, and then I close. I have some error here. I think I have an extra. Yeah, there it is, an extra parentheses. All right, there it is. So my floating action button has an onPressed method which calls the navigator.pushName method and passes the argument here, context, and then screen as the second argument. This might look better, honestly, if it were on one line. Sometimes. No, it doesn't. Okay. All right. And that should take me to the next page. So let's save it and see what happens. Here it is. So the app is restarted, or hot loaded, hot reloaded, whatever they call it. And here we go. Click the button and nothing. It doesn't go. Could not find a generator for route settings screen. Yes, because that's not the name of it. It's screen 2. So that's a good example of what happens if you don't have the right route name. Here we go. There I am. It took me there. It takes me back and forth. And now I can flip at will between those two routes. Okay, so this has gotten long enough, so I'm going to quit it now. But let me just end by saying it's cool, it works, all right, yeah, nice. But I don't have any of this information. I don't have the items in this list. I don't have the list, the array list, or whatever Flutter calls these things, the list that is defined up here, this groceries thing. Nor do I have the purchased items either. I don't have any of this stuff. When I go here, I don't have access to them because they're not in that class. Now, what do I do to get around that? And if you watched the previous video, you saw there were a couple of different things you could do. Well, navigation, using these cookbooks that you see here in the tutorial section on the Flutter dev site, there is, this concept is obviously solved. You can pass arguments to a named route. It's right there. So very simple to do. And in the early days of mobile app programming, this is how it was really done. And I want to make that point loud and clear because memory on early mobile devices was limited. So you didn't keep things around in memory that you didn't need. So when you went from one screen to another, instead of just kind of having all those items existing in global memory space somewhere, or even in some scoped space, associated with the class or anything, you didn't keep them. You actually needed the memory to free up, and so you just passed them over to the next screen and did what you needed, and then you passed them back when you didn't need them. So that was done intentionally because of the small memory footprint of these devices. So this kind of navigation back and forth between screens and the passing of routes through the pipeline that we're going to do in the next video is really cool. And it is definitely still a design principle that's used extensively. Now, what you will find a lot of people do is they sort of, and I mentioned this in the last video, what they'll do is they'll take data from this page here, and when they push like this to the next page, they'll actually take a moment and save it first to some app space, some local storage space. And then this screen will just have access to it because it's been saved. And you can do that, but a couple of things can happen in that scenario. One is when you do the push over to with the navigator, there is a time delay associated with saving data, and so that's asynchronous. So you would probably want to wait to go to the next screen and make sure that you don't do that until you get the complete write process finished, right? So when any writing operation takes place, be it to a database or to some kind of preferences app space or whatever it is to writing, you do get a callback, you get an option, and it would to do something at that point in time. And that's when I would want to actually go to the screen, because otherwise you could wind up on the screen and you could click something while the writing was still going on. I mean, obviously if it's local storage, it's only going to take a few milliseconds to do the writing, but nonetheless, proper form would be to do that, right? So you do have to think about these things. Otherwise, what you could do is you could have things saved on this page when you did, something else. Like maybe every time you added an item or every time you swiped, you could just save to your core storage space. So there is that approach to doing things. But I think for the time being, I'm going to talk about the way of passing data back and forth using the navigator arguments approach. Also, it is conceivable that you could rewrite the class constructor here for the state class, and we don't actually even have a constructor defined, but you could write one if you wanted to. And in that case, you could actually supply it with particular arguments so that when you did your navigator.push, which is, where the heck am I doing that? That is right over here. You could, in a sense, call that constructor and pass in the arguments that way. So you'd sort of manually, that's how the navigator works, essentially. That's what it's doing for you. But you could roll your own and do that manually if you wanted to. All right, but next time, that's what we'll do. So I think for the time being, you should try that. Before I go ahead and make another video, if you're watching from home and you're in my class, my mobile apps class, then you should do this, of course, and then your assignment is just to try to extend it a little bit by visiting this documentation over here in the navigation section here and try to implement the passing of arguments from one place to another so that when you do that, when you go to this page, the second page, you should be able to have access to the list, at least the, pass over the array of groceries so that they're available here as well. And you don't have to do anything with them, but I don't know, maybe, have the, maybe they're printed or something in some way in a text widget on the screen, just so we can see that they're there. All right, so that would be a great follow-up activity for homework for you to do. And as I said, that's certainly the next thing I'm going to make the video for. But rather than waiting for me to do it, go ahead and try it yourself. All right, thanks for watching. Take care. Have a great day.